Hello, hello. Welcome to Inspiring Women with ADHD. I'm Renee, the host of this podcast, and I'm excited to be here, but I feel kind of drained. So I don't know. We'll see how my energy is today, but I'm here. I'm sure you don't mind if I'm in a mellower mood. In fact, one of my friends told me years ago that since I was so optimistic most of the time, that she wished I would tell her when I wasn't, so that she didn't feel like there were people that never had sad moments or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, just being real here today. I'm a bit mellower, but we'll see if that stays that way or not. Today, what I wanted to talk to you about is distractions and just seeing the difference in them, recognizing them, having the ability to see what's going on. And I think as our lives get more complicated, it's harder to detect them or to prevent them because they come from so many directions. And I think back to when I was younger, people would just take the phone off the hook to be able to get something done because then they wouldn't get an incoming call because you just had one phone in your house or one number anyway, one landline, whether you had more than one phone or not. And maybe somebody might knock at the door, but even that, do you have to answer the door? You learn that you can block out a distraction if you really need to. And I even did that when I used to exercise in the morning. I'd take the phone off the hook so I couldn't get a call that would make me start to think of something else I needed to do. Whether just the disruption is something that takes a few minutes because you actually spend time doing it, or it takes you off track, you lose that momentum or even forget what you were working on, or it gives you a new task. It might give you a new priority because you talked to somebody. And that was a simple way to block that distraction. And then I had a cell phone like everyone else did. I started realizing that that was a distraction in so many more ways. People don't call on the phone as often, but they send text, or you might be your own distraction because you open to check, did this email come in or that email go out, or you're curious about something, so you look it up on your phone, and all of a sudden you are so far away, either from what you started to do, or you've taken away from the time that you need to spend on it. Let's say you only have an hour to do whatever you wanted to do. If I was going to work out, I have an hour max, and I've actually chosen a workout to do, whether it's a streamed, live stream workout DVD. I have a lot of DVDs and videos from the past, and don't do the VHS anymore, but I still pull out the DVDs from time to time, and I do some live stream workouts, or I go to the gym, do my own workout. But whatever that time frame I have set aside for exercising, or whether or not it's even set aside, that may be my only possibility because I have a time commitment after that. If I chip into that because I get distracted, then either I have to cut it short or I don't get to do what I wanted to do. I have to do it in a different way. And then that messes with your mind and your energy and your ability to focus on it. And some things simply can't be done in a shorter amount of time. A workout you might be able to cut short, and it's not the same plan as what you had. Let's say you were going to do an upper body workout and lower body, and now you only have time for lower body. You weren't able to fulfill the same goal, but you were still able to accomplish something. But there are some tasks that you might want to do or need to do that actually take a whole hour. And if you end up with only 30 minutes or 40 minutes or something, you may not even start at that point because you'll think, I don't have time to finish it. I don't have time to go far enough into it to make it even worth my time right now. So it can really interfere with our productivity if we don't know how to manage our distractions. If we don't stand there with a shield and a sword and say, get away, get away. That's one way to fight distractions. And sometimes, depending on the distraction, that's what we do. Other times, it's actually shutting that door. Let's say you're in a big safe in a bank or something where they have those really thick doors, and you just shut that door and nothing's coming through. Well, I've never been in one of those rooms, but you know what I mean. You've made your barricade. You've made that possible for that distraction not to be there for you. And that's one of the things that's good to know is what can I prevent? What can I actually remove? And how can I make this more possible for me to get something done? And this all changes according to where we are, when we need to get something done, what the distractions may be. And there are two categories for distractions: outer and inner. And the outer distractions are external, they're outside of you. They're things that affect you, but they don't come from you, although you could invite them in. So social media could be one. A lot of these will be digital. Social media could be one. And you have a tendency when you get anxious or bored or whatever to, or just curious to think, I wonder what that person's doing. Or you have whatever reason it is to go on to any of the social media outlets and check on something or just look at something. And when you do, you know that that can take you so far away from what you were doing in the first place that you may even forget why you went there. It could be for just a break. It could be to actually get a piece of information, but it could also take your brain very, very far away. And that's what it's designed to do. And in many ways, it's nice and helpful at times. In other ways, it's super disruptive. So a way to avoid that distraction is to take it off of your phone. Have you ever done that? Just actually delete an app from your phone or take it off of the home page. I've done that before where it's still on my phone, that if there is a time that I want to be able to check it, I can, but it's a lot harder to find. And that's kind of like when there's food in your house that you don't want to eat, but you know you might be tempted to eat. So you put it up a lot higher or quote unquote hide it. If it's not as visible, you're not as likely to eat it or be tempted by it. But you still know where it is. So if you really wanted to, you could find it. So taking the app actually off of your phone, or if you're working on a computer, you can't really take that off of your computer, but you might make yourself a little note that says, you know, like might have a F for Facebook and a little line through it or something to remind you, don't go on there, or just tell yourself, I'm not going to go on here for this next hour. The internet is another one, which, you know, we might think is similar to social media. It is, but the internet in general, Googling for information, trying to pacify or satisfy or fulfill a question, answer a question. I was going to say pacify curiosity. So many of us have very, very curious minds. And when we need to answer that question, we want to find the answer. And I thought maybe I was the only person who did this, but I found it's very common for people with ADHD. When you're watching a show, a movie, and you see an actor or an actress and they are very familiar to you, but you don't know how. Does that ever happen to you? And you think, who is it? Who is it? And you try to think of who it is. The easiest thing to do is to go on to IMDb or just Google, you know, the person. But well, I guess you don't know the names, so you can't Google the person. But IMDb is fantastic because you can go on there, look up the show that you're watching, actually click on episodes, go to the season, go to the episode. Sometimes I pause what I'm watching, so it shows me it's episode 13 from season 2 or whatever it is. Look it up, look through the photos or the name of the character if you know their name, and you can look and find all the shows, movies they've been on. And I tend to watch a lot of kind of crime oriented shows like Monk or Psych or Law and Order or The Mentalist or The Guardian. There's different ones that we're watching. The Guardian's one my son wanted to watch because we liked The Mentalist. But anyway, a lot of those actors and actresses are are only on one or two episodes of a certain show. And I found that there are actors who are in multiple episodes of Law and Order or multiple variations of Law and Order. And I'll think, oh, that's how I've seen them. And then I want to know what they look like then and if I would recall that, that episode. So I'm trying to pacify these needs in my brain to remember and make that connection and go, oh, okay. It's something that bubbles up inside of me that is such a distraction from actually watching the show. That if I can get that to calm down by getting the information, then I can enjoy the show. And it's very trying when you're in a movie theater and that happens because you can't find out. I never open my phone when I'm watching a movie. We shouldn't do that. Plus, I want to enjoy the movie. But I sit there and I go, oh, oh. And if I'm sitting by somebody, I can't even usually ask them because at least my kids, well, my husband, if I asked him, he wouldn't know. And he doesn't watch all the shows that I do. And so he might not remember. Sometimes I might ask him if we're watching a show at night. But a lot of the movies or shows I've seen with my daughters, and they aren't people who want to be whispered to in a theater. They don't want me to talk. So I've learned that. I'm not going to be able to ask them. So that can be hard. So sometimes we have to let these questions go unanswered, which can be hard, but we can learn to deal with that unrest that happens in the body, that curiosity. Sometimes the curiosity can just wait. It's not easy, but it can wait. And if you're watching a show and you want to get that answer, you can pause your show at home or whatever. If you don't want to do that with whatever project you're working on, or you don't want to get distracted by that question you have in your mind, write the question down. Write it down. You might have a whole list of questions or curious thoughts to look into later, but write that down to do later. That way you don't lose it. That way you don't lose that need that you have. And you may not even, remember it later, but it does put your mind at rest a little bit to know that the answer can come later, that you're not going to forget about it. And that goes for so many things that happen in our brains. And these are more internal distractions. So I got way out on the outer distraction. But the internal distractions or inner distractions can lead to an outer distraction if you go to find the answer in an outer way. And just by being on your computer to look up one thing or being on your phone to look up one thing can cause more external distractions by saying, oh, I got a text, or oh, I'll just check my email, or oh, whatever tabs you still have open on your laptop. If you look that up real quickly, something on your computer, and you're trying to accomplish something that doesn't involve your computer, once you go on there, it's Pandora's box. The old story of Pandora's box, when you open it, it is so hard to close it again because all those things come out. And that I look at all those things in the air, whether they're butterflies. I don't really remember the story of Pandora, but I'm thinking of them as butterflies or something like that. If they all come out, those are actually thoughts in your head that are just clouding and making it harder for you to focus. Some other outer distractions, and this one is also digitally related, is little notifications that can come up. So whatever you have, your phone, your device, it could even be your computer. If you have notifications that make sounds for texts or any communication apps, Messenger, WhatsApp, any of those, if they make a sound or even come up with a little screen and you have that device there where you'll see that, that can distract you. Also phone calls. So you can silence your device, and I'm sure you know how to do that. Turn the ringer off so you don't hear anything, but you can also see it digitally. A lot of times it'll light up your screen or wake up your screen. So if you don't want to see anything from your phone, you could put it in a different room. You could turn it off. You could turn it upside down. There are different things that you could do, and you could determine what that is. You may have certain people that are your emergency people that you want to be able to hear from, and there are different ways depending on your phone to make that happen, where they will come through even with your notifications off or any of that, even with your sound off. You can get, like if you have an iPhone, Find My iPhone, people who are on that list for you to follow you, track you, know where you are, people in your family, they can contact you that way, and it will break through all those other things. Just like if I've lost my own phone and I use my Apple Watch or my computer to find my iPhone, which I do multiple times a day, it will make a sound. If somebody says, I'll call your phone, that doesn't do me any good because I almost always have my ringer off. But if they were tracking me, if they were on my Find My list, they could make that sound come up on my phone. And my oldest son figured that out a couple of years ago, and he does that occasionally. So I usually know it's him because he's the only one that really does that. But it's helped in times of emergency. So you can make it possible to pacify those worries of, but what if it's this person? Strategize, figure it out, find a way to stop messages coming in or any distraction coming in that you don't want to be distracted by. Other outer distractions are family needs. If you have children at home, you may be working on something and they may need you. So that may be something that you learn to manage, whether it's your ability to take care of it quickly and come back, or set them up so they are doing a puzzle or reading books, or you put a little work into it in advance so they understand mommy needs this time right now, and you're able to do it. It may not be 100% foolproof. There may be times where you do need to stop, but I look back to when I first started exercising at home in the morning, because at first I thought I have to exercise at night after my kids go to bed. This is when I had just had my fourth baby, and I thought, I think that's going to be the way that it works, is I get everyone to bed and then I work out. And that worked a lot of the time, but a lot of times at nighttime, like if you're tired or other things can come up, it was easier for things to take priority at that time than first thing in the morning. And so I had to give something up by doing that. And I still look back and kind of wonder, kind of wish I hadn't, because it was a really wonderful thing that I gave up. But it used to be that in the morning, my children would come in, and we always had our bed pretty low to the floor because for a long time we didn't have a real mattress. We had a futon that we bought in Hollywood at a really cheap futon store when we lived in Pasadena. And I'm sure it wasn't made of the greatest stuff, but anyway, that's what we afforded. And we just had like a wooden platform holding thing. It wasn't like a real bed. Anyway, and it can make into a three-fold couch. I don't know if you remember those from the 90s, but anyway, that was our bed, and it was really close to the floor. It does make your room look bigger when your bed's lower. That was one nice thing. But anyway, it made it possible for our kids to get up in the morning and they could just come in and just climb in and snuggle. And it was nice to wake up to that and just have that quiet time. But when I decided that I needed to work out first thing in the morning, I got up before they did, but I knew that they might wake up and want to come in and have their needs. Back then I used to give them juice in sippy cups. I know at some point people were saying, that's a lot of sugar on their teeth, but I gave them juice. So I would make a sippy cup of juice for whoever needed them, or a bottle, or whatever it was I was doing. And maybe my babies didn't take bottles very well, so I probably didn't do that. But anyway, I set them up and I put a gate. I was working out in my bedroom at the time. We only had one TV, but it was in our bedroom for a little while. And I set up a baby gate at my room and told the ones who could understand, when you wake up, I'm going to be exercising and I can't do A, B, or C for you until I'm done. So if they woke up, they knew that's what I was doing. And maybe they'd come there and say things, but I could still stay focused for the most part, and it worked. And even when it was years later, different house, by the time we'd had our sixth baby, even our fifth, I was waking up really early. I had a new thing where I would wake up and feed my baby like at 4:35 in the morning, and usually they just go right back to sleep, and then work out right then. And after my last baby was born, my last son, when he would wake up and he was old enough to crawl or walk or whatever, he would come in, whether I'd fed him first or not, he'd wake up and he'd know that I would be in there exercising. And because that was the pattern, he knew he was supposed to stay away until the very end. And I would always stretch. And then I started doing a lot of yoga. And he would know not to come on my mat, because I learned it's not very easy. It's kind of like when you see people doing goat yoga. And I know that's supposed to be all entertaining and funny. I've never done it. For some reason, it just doesn't appeal to me. But I'm sure it's funny socially. But I learned that it wasn't fun to have a child, kind of crawl under you while you're doing cat and cow or trying, whatever. Or sometimes they might lean on you wrong in a imbalanced way, and then you could hurt something. So I taught him from a very young age. At the very end of my exercise, I'll be doing a forward fold. Do a seated forward fold, and he would come and just kind of hug me from the back and lean on my back, which is what yoga teachers do sometimes in yoga studios, is lean or just use their hands to press on the low back to help them go forward. So he was my yoga assistant from a very young age, but that became his cuddling time, where he knew, even as, like a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, he'd say, is it time yet? Is it time yet? And sometimes even in child's pose, he'd come and he just kind of hover over me like he's going over the back of a turtle to hug, and would just kind of hug me, and it was helping me, and it was a nice thing. But I set up a system with him and with my other children to be able to exercise without that outer distraction of needing to take care of their needs. And there are so many other ways that you may need to do that, but it does take some strategizing. It does take some communication, some rules. These are, kind of like when they say a school teacher comes in and says, these are the rules of the classroom. You set up your rules, you set up your structure. I'm going to be doing this, and when I do this, you do that. And I've done that with my granddaughter, Piper. There's been days last year when I would pick her up from preschool, and I had to teach yoga like 15 minutes after getting back home. I could pick her up and get back, and I had to teach yoga on Zoom. And it wouldn't have worked with 3 grandchildren in my son's family to come over and do it. But with one, I knew I could manage her and set her up so she had something to do, what she calls alone time. And my husband was, I locked the door so she couldn't get out and stuff. And she could come by me if she needed to. But if my husband was nearby, he would know she was there. And there was a time or two that nobody else was home. And I would say, I'm going to set you up with some snacks, and you can do this, and you can watch Bluey, or here's this puzzle, choose a toy. And so she would have in her mind, this is what I'm going to do in that hour, while Marma, that's what she calls me, while Marma's in there teaching yoga. If there was an emergency, yeah, she could come in, and yeah, I could take care of it and tell whoever was in the class give me a minute, go into child's pose, whatever it is. But I could take care of it. But I was able to manage what was a possible outer distraction by setting that up first. So many other things. If you're in a house, an office, even if you go to a coffee shop to be able to work on something, conversations, noise, coworkers, sounds, whether it's a background sound, an ambient sound, or an intermittent sound where it occasionally happens. If you're in public, people's voices getting louder, or laughter, or whatever it is, sirens going by, any of those things can be distractions to our brain. And figuring out how you can either prevent those from happening, or if they do happen, how to handle them. I know when my youngest son was in middle school, their school was on a main street in our town. And he would tell me afterwards when he would hear the fire sirens go by in town, because they'd usually go from the station, was actually, because I taught yoga at that fire station, actually. It was just a few blocks from them. So the fire engine would have to go by the school to get on the freeway or to go anywhere in town. And he would hear that, and he'd always worry that something happened to me and that they were going to help me, which was so sweet, but also so sad. And I tell him, no, I'm okay. Oh, I'm okay. But I'm realizing that was just a distraction while he was doing his schoolwork. That was something that took him off task. So he had to find a way to get himself back on task to be able to work on what he needed to. Another outer distraction could be eating. And you might think of this as an inner one, because you're, and the way that could be an inner distraction is if you're hungry. And so you get those signals like, I need to eat something, I need to eat something, but actually eating could be a distraction to what you're doing. If you're needing to do work on your computer and you're using your hands and you have something, let's say eating, it's not really eating, it's drinking, but if I had a smoothie, that's a minimal outer distraction, because I can pick it up, sip it, and get quite a bit of nutrition or satisfaction or whatever in my body from minimal interference. But if it's something like eating popcorn, your hand is constantly going back and forth, and then your hand has stuff on it. There's multiple steps to get your hands back on the keyboard. And I'm laughing because these are things I think about, because I like to eat popcorn almost every day. So I save it for watching TV. I save it for times when I don't need my hands. And it's funny because I've thought of things like this back to when I was having my babies and things like that, because I've always loved eating pomegranates. And it's never bothered me how messy it is or how involved it is. It's not an easy thing to do. You don't, like, a banana is the easiest fruit. If you think of things that have a lot of steps, if you have ADHD to where you're overwhelmed by all the steps in either making a food or eating a food, you realize that bananas are pretty simple. It's kind of like swimming is a really simple sport. If you got the pool, you put on the swimsuit and you jump in. You really don't need a lot. Skiing, not so simple. Boots, all the clothing, ski, so many steps. Ski pass, but swimming, very simple. So bananas, the simple food. You just peel it. You don't even have to wash it. You just peel it and you eat it. It's so simple. But a pomegranate is quite the opposite. Even a watermelon, that takes some steps, right? You have to cut into the watermelon, then you have to scoop it out. You have to decide, how you want it cut. And then it's messy. Well, pomegranates are messy too, but pomegranates, they're up there at the top for multiple steps in eating it, especially prep work. Some people do a lot of prep work. I don't. I eat a lot of, I'll just call them seeds. I know they have a different name, arrows or something like that, but I just break them open till you see these beautiful jewels of red. And then I eat a lot at once. And I've seen all the ideas of how to open them perfectly and stuff. And I have my method. It's not as perfect as some of those Instagram videos, but it's good for me. And I've been eating them since I was young. And every year when it was pomegranate season, I would spend a lot of time eating them. I think the most I've eaten in one day was like 7. I used to eat so many. I don't eat that many anymore. But as I started having babies, I realized that when pomegranate season came, at least in California, it's just a couple months. In Florida, pomegranate season is like 3 times as long, which is pretty fun. They grow a lot longer here. And we even have a pomegranate ranch or farm pretty close to us. I need to find out when their come pick your own pomegranate day is, if they're starting that again. But anyway, so when I was having babies, I would realize that I didn't really have time to sit and eat a pomegranate with kids around. I wasn't just sitting, I was always going, and I was fine with that. I was fine with going. But the sitting and the ability to just, I'm by myself and I can eat a pomegranate, it got to where the only time I could really do that when I had a newborn, when I was still breastfeeding a baby, and I breastfed all of mine until they were 1, at least, but usually about 1. But I'd think, okay, I could sit here and eat the pomegranate while I'm breastfeeding them. But I also like to use that time to read because I could sit and read. And so it was really a battle in my mind of which I would do, because I was giving up reading time to eat the pomegranate or pomegranate time to read the book. And when I think about it now, I think that's just because my other kids knew that's my time that they don't distract me. I mean, sure, they could come and ask me a question or if they needed help with something, but they knew I needed to sit there and I wasn't going to get up. And so because of that, I was able to read the book. I was able to eat the pomegranate. And really, for me to be able to sit and relax, my mind wasn't going. I wasn't thinking I needed to be doing something else. When I'm reading a book now, I'm so thinking I need to be doing something else. So, yeah. So eating can get in the way of something too. And especially if you're doing something like cleaning out a closet, eating's not that convenient unless you have something in your pocket. I've done that before because I am a grazer. Are you a grazer? Where you might have a protein bar, or I don't know what else could work in your pocket, but things that you could eat in your pocket and take a bite and it sustains you a little bit longer, and then you take another bite and it's not that big of distraction. So this is a list of things that if you want to gain control of focus and managing your outer distractions, you will need to gain control of these things. And I've mentioned them a little bit before, but phone calls, text messages, social media, family. And that might seem weird, like I have to control your family. You don't have to control your family, but you have to control how those distractions might impact you, which I'm writing myself a note right now because I don't want to get off track, but I am just going to write one thing to make sure I don't forget how they actually distract me even when they're not saying anything. Okay, so family, conversations, noise, movement, maybe just a bird that flies by and it just captures your peripheral. As you're working on something, you see something out the window, or you see a bug or something like that distracts you. It's something new to take care of, or it's just something, a fly in the air that takes your mind somewhere else. I've probably mentioned it before. One of my sons had a school teacher that said, I know that if there's a fly in the room flying around, I've lost his attention. He won't be able to hear what I'm saying while I'm teaching because he's watching that fly. So even if there's no sound, it could just be movement. And sometimes that involves you getting up and wanting to see, can I get that fly to go out the door? It might be trying to deal with that movement, or it might just be it took your brain away. Other things that you need to control or learn how to come back from. Music. Is there music going on in another room? Can you handle that? Do you need earplugs? Is there a way to manage that? Internet access, emails coming in. Do you check your emails regularly, sporadically? If you're doing something and you think, oh, I need to send that email. Sometimes we remember something that we need to do, whether it's answering an email, a text message, or something like that. That's more of an inner distraction. But if you ever actually act on that and open the email for one thing, it could lead you to a lot. So coworkers, other people in your home, pets, your pets, that could be the sound, the movement, their needs, a lot of ways that that could be a distraction to have your pet there, but also your pet could be adding to the wonderfulness of your situation. I don't want to say anything negative there. It could be a positive, but if it's a distraction, if it's taking you away, then recognize that and see if there's a way to work with it. Traffic, if you live somewhere or work in an office where there's a lot of traffic, how do you gain control, at least within yourself, with that outer distraction? Sometimes you can change the situation. Maybe, like, I used to teach yoga in a room that had cars going by, and it was loud. And I don't know if anyone else minded, but it interfered with my ability to think while I taught the class. So I didn't end up renting that space. I subbed for a friend who taught there in this Pilates studio. And I didn't like that distraction. So I changed the situation and taught somewhere else where there wasn't that sound of traffic. There have been other places I've taught where I've had to learn to deal with the traffic a little bit, especially when I taught outside. And you have to learn to think that's okay. And I talked about eating, and then also whatever you're drinking or something, if that's disruptive, especially if you're like me and you spill a lot on yourself or on other things. So that's the outer distraction talk. I could talk about inner too, and I won't. I'm going to save that for the next episode. I might release it sooner this week than later. I've been spacing them about 3 days apart, but I'm doing my first 5-day focus challenge this week. And so I wanted to have a couple episodes that would dig a little deeper into this discussion about distractions, because that is such a big piece of being able to focus. And it's just setting a pathway, a clear pathway to be able to focus. We don't want to try to find the most complex environment and see if we can focus in it. I mean, I actually have heard that for yoga. You're truly doing yoga if you can quiet your mind when all those other things are happening. And maybe that's true. Maybe that's a greater level, more advanced level of mindfulness, but that isn't always possible. And especially when we need to function in life, and so many things that we need to focus on aren't the big things. They're the little things. And creating these skills, creating these patterns of managing distractions, whether outer or inner, or minimizing them, seeing how you can change what time of day you're doing something, what room you're doing it in, and what people are there, that can help too. So I did write my note, which helped me remember, even though it's not the neatest note. My handwriting's gone a little downhill the last several years. But okay, back to this last thing. And this does have to do with outer distractions, but people in your home. So if you have any obligation to people in your home, which you probably do, meaning taking care of their needs, if they're children, or helping them out, supporting them emotionally, however you have that obligation, or you are an empathetic person by nature, and that does come with ADHD for some people. So if you're highly empathetic, and I am, if you absorb other people's emotions, whether they're talking or whether they don't, or you're assuming their emotions, whether they're saying anything or actually feeling that or not, which you may not think is empathetic, but it is, because whether you actually can tell what their emotion is, you have empathy toward them, in case they're feeling that way, right? So I'm sure I'll do another whole episode on empathy. But back to this. If you have all those things going into it, and a person walks in a room and you're focusing on something, you may have the tendency to stop focusing on what you're doing, whether they need you or not, and be present for them. Do you ever have that? Do you ever feel like you need to be present for a person who walks in the room? You may not feel that way. I feel like I have that maybe from both of my grandmas and my mom, even my dad, I would say. We all have this host mentality, and I'm not saying it's a negative at all, but I used to think everyone had this because I grew up around it. I can even look at my aunts and probably most of my uncles, and I think so many of us have that in our genes. And maybe it was a way, it was a cultural way for us as well. But that when someone comes in the room, we want to make sure they're comfortable. We want to see if there's something we can do for them. We want to make sure that they don't feel unattended to, not recognized, not greeted, any of those things. As I've learned from my husband and some of my kids who don't have that in their genes, they don't feel that need. And I look at my husband's family, and most of them don't either. They may not be distracted when somebody else comes in because they may still be able to just keep doing what they're doing and thinking, oh, that person's walking by. That's fine. Whereas I might think, oh, do you want me to be available to talk to you? I can do that. And then I've learned from them that sometimes they'd rather I didn't do that because then I'm distracting them from what they're doing. But it's hard to know. And I think as a mom, I've always been available to my kids. I've always been available to my husband. And I don't want them to feel ignored. And yet, now that I'm doing most of my work at home, and many of them are home or nearby to come home, I am constantly distracted because I feel a need to be there for them or to just check in with them. And I'm still working with that. And I have had some conversations, like I'll say to my daughter, oh, I had my earbuds in because that really helps me block out distractions, to listen to a podcast, listen to an audiobook, listen to a TV show, listen to whatever. If I have those in, I can keep my brain where it is. If I take them out and be present, my brain goes somewhere else. And that may be okay. And sometimes I just can't get back to what I was focusing on, or I can't accomplish. Like earlier when I was saying, you only have 1 hour, you got to keep working on it. So I haven't had all these conversations, but conversations are helpful. I've had the conversation with my daughter. If I have, my earbud in, if you need something, let me know. I can take it out. She's like, oh no, don't feel like you have to take it out. And sometimes I talk to her and see she's got her earbud in. And obviously we don't want to live in a house where none of us talk to each other and we all have our earbuds in all the time. But we are all adults too. And sometimes we're doing different things and we're living together. And we're needing the support of each other in allowing ourselves to continue what we're doing. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? When there are little kids here, because I have grandchildren, so it's kind of like I'm being a mom again. I'm not saying I'm their mom. Their moms are their moms for sure. But I'm in that more mom mode. Most of the time, I've been completely present for them. And sometimes I ignore things that need to be done because of that. And then I feel more exhausted afterwards because I'm either further behind on some things that didn't get done, maybe cleanliness, clutter, that kind of thing, or I just have so much to do afterwards that it's overwhelming. So I'm looking to their parents and seeing that they're like I was. They're not 100% attentive to their children 100% of the time. They're not 100% mentally available all the time. There are times that they do their things, they set their children up for their things, allow them some downtime, learn how to play on your own, that kind of thing. And I can do that too. So it is certainly a journey depending on what your circumstances are. And I haven't worked in an office, oh my goodness, since I guess it was 1990, early 1990. Which some of you listening, and I hope you're listening if you're younger, you can be a younger woman listening to my podcast, even though my daughters are probably your age. That's totally fine. One of my daughters has ADHD, and maybe two of them, and my daughter-in-law, they're probably your age if you're in the younger group. But yeah, the last time I worked in an office, unless I'm forgetting something, was March of 1990 when I went into labor 3.5 weeks early. And never went in again, but they brought the work to me in the hospital in 3 bags. My cousin and I were just talking about that. She came in as an administrative assistant to take my place when I went on maternity leave and eventually stopped working there. And my boss sent her in with 3 bags of the files that I was currently working on, from my file drawer, to see the status of each while I was having contractions in the hospital. And Joanne, my cousin, had never had a baby before, but she knew I wasn't right. And she'd have to pause while I was in pain in my contractions. And my boss, who I loved like a second mom, yeah, it was interesting. I just realized she didn't know. She never would have done that. There's the empathy there. My boss never would have done that if she'd ever experienced childbirth. But anyway, yeah, 1990. So I haven't experienced the workplace in a long time. I've worked places, but not in an office. And your distractions may vary, but I'm sure you can tell what they are. I'm sure you can look at them, see what they are, and see how you've already been managing them and how you might possibly do better at that. So it's a good thing I didn't talk about inner distractions in depth today because this is already a lengthy podcast, but I hope you don't mind. I love listening to long podcasts. I love when they're an hour and a half. I have one that I've listened to multiple times that's 3 hours long. They combined 3 episodes, and I love it because then I don't listen to the intro and outro music in between. No, maybe not everybody's like me, but my mind loves that, so I can get things done that take longer. But I just wanted to say thanks for being here today. If you haven't jumped into this first 5-day focus challenge and you want to get in the next one, they begin each Monday, and you can sign up now on my website. There is a spot to do it on the homepage of reneeallen.com with a hyphen in it. And I think there's a link to my website wherever your podcast information is on me, whatever format you're listening to. But the funny thing is I know that anytime I give a suggestion like, hey, if you want to do this, I know that if you're like me and your working memory isn't great, you'll think about it now and you may forget. But if you remember, or if I say it multiple times and you want to do it, then maybe you will remember later to do it if you can't do it now. But feel free to sign up for that challenge. Or if you have done a challenge before, you're welcome to do it more than one time just to go through the motions. What you're doing is developing a pattern, developing a habit, developing habits that will help you focus on anything that you want to focus on in the best way you possibly can. But thanks so much for being here. I'll make the episode with the inner distractions to have available in a couple days. And I'm just really glad you were here today. I do feel a lot better than I did when I started. Maybe you can tell. Thanks so much for being here. Bye.
Open windows, broken shadows. Frozen dreams are left for tomorrow. Without a cause, no time for a pause. Rewind, I've run out of time to sing melodies and harmonies. I'm cut short, the silence of sound has yet been found, but not by me.